Welcome to TYT, everyone. I'm Anna Kasparian. Joining us for hour one of today's show is John Iadarola, host of The Damage Report, Dragon Daddy, and also a good friend of mine. John, how you doing?
Good enough friend that I'll allow it. No, I'm glad to be here. Wednesday is definitely one of the days I look forward to. It also seems like, doesn't it feel like it's Wednesday often? I feel like we just did this together, which is good because it's awesome, but doesn't it feel like we just did this?
The days go by faster and faster, which every time I stop and think about that, I realize how short life is. And while there might be some awful things happening in the world and maybe even in our personal lives, we need to savor every day. Yeah. We're lucky to be alive. What a time to be alive. And I'll explain why throughout the entire show, because we have lots of topics prepared for you guys, including updates on the impeachment trial. I have to say the Democratic Party certainly came prepared for this impeachment trial, and we'll show you why. Later in the show, Wosny Lambre will be joining us to discuss Mark Cuban's decision to not do the national anthem during a recent game. Was that intentional? What's going on? There's all sorts of conflicting messaging going on that story, but it's okay because Woz is a writer for The Athletic and his specific beat is the NBA. So he'll shed some light on what actually happened with that story. And later on, we'll also discuss Bernie Sanders being referred to as a slut in a really, really weird context. Okay, I'm not even kidding. That's a story that happened. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, eventually his reputation was going to come out, and finally we're going to adjudicate it. Just absolute madness. But you know what, John? Let's remind everyone that there's an easy way that you can support this show, and that's to like and share this stream. Please do so because we're trying to get the message of progressivism out there to the world, and it won't cost you anything. It won't take any time. Like and share this stream, and if you haven't already, make sure that you click on that little bell if you're watching on YouTube, because that's the best way to stay up to date with TYT and all of the content that we're putting out there in the world, especially on YouTube. But without further ado, why don't we move on and talk a little bit about what happened on day 2 of the Senate impeachment trial. Democrats were certainly prepared for day 1 of the Senate impeachment trial, but day 2 was no exception. Today marked the second day that Donald Trump's impeachment trial continued. And in it, there were various videos, countless videos shown as evidence of Trump's provocations and what they led to. Now, we have a few highlights for you today, including this first video that we're going to share with you. And many of the videos that were shown today have not been seen yet, but there was a mix of content that many of you have probably already seen and some pretty terrifying footage that most Americans have not seen. So let's begin with what Representative Nancyyy showed on this second day of the impeachment trial. Take a look.
They believed that they were following his orders. They said so.
I thought I was following my president. I thought I was following what we were called to do. President Trump requested that we be in DC on the 6th.
You heard it from them. They were doing what he wanted them to do.
And so it's important for the impeachment managers to draw that connection between Donald Trump's words and the actions carried out by these insurrectionists on January 6th. And while there was an abundance of evidence presented on day 2 of this trial, unfortunately, the accomplices for Donald Trump. Senator Josh Hawley, for instance, wasn't paying attention to any of this. In fact, an NBC reporter, Garrett Hake, basically mentioned that Hawley had his legs up on the seat in front of him, reading unrelated material as the trial continued. So that's who Josh Hawley is, one of the Republican senators who was willing to challenge the Electoral College votes, even though he knew that there wasn't a single shred of evidence indicating that there was widespread voter fraud in the general election. So John, take it away. What are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, no, today watching the footage was rough. There were some patches that I missed, but I feel like I saw enough to know, to feel reconfirmed in what we all know, which is that the idea that Donald Trump didn't incite this is sheer madness. I mean, his organization paid literally millions of dollars to organizers who are bringing people there. The people who were at his speech then went there. He told them to. The funniest part, of course, is that he said he would march with them and then he just went home and watched TV, which is just an amazing owning of his own people. But they did go and they did do what he wanted them to do. They targeted the people that he wanted them to target, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. It's laid out so clearly, and the new video was pretty amazing. Josh Hawley and others, Rand Paul yesterday was supposedly just doodling or something. Can't be bothered to pay attention to this. These are people that either have stood by as Donald Trump has brought us to this point over the course of 4 years, or they're people who, like Josh Hawley, are not just biased going into this vote in the normal way that people would be, not wanting to necessarily convict a president of their party, but he wants those people that did all of this, that are waiting on Trump's next commands, to support him next time. He wants the angry mob to choose him when Trump is gone, and he gets to be one of the votes. It's mad that this is the way that it works, that he doesn't even have to pretend to be thinking about what actually happened, that his colleagues could have been killed that day. And they're gonna have to continue to work with him, knowing who he is and how little regard he has for their lives.
You mentioned other people who were targeted that day by name, and how there was a very clear connection between Donald Trump's words during his rally speech and then what was carried out later. So one thing that really stood out to me about today's evidence was the footage featuring Donald Trump basically calling out Vice President Mike Pence for not going along with his wishes in refusing to certify the Electoral College votes. He mentioned Mike Pence by name during his speech, and then that was immediately followed by these insurrectionists chanting, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence." That footage was shown during the trial today. And how can anyone deny that Trump was the one who inspired the insurrectionists that day? I mean, especially with that very specific case of Mike Pence. You didn't have these right-wing militias target Mike Pence before that. You didn't have right-wing gang members talk about how Mike Pence is a threat to democracy or a threat to the Republican Party or anything like that. Mike Pence carried water for Donald Trump, licked his boots all the way through Trump's term, until it came to that one day that he had to do the ceremonial procedure of counting the Electoral College votes, which, by the way, had already been certified on a state level. That's what matters the most. So he was doing what he was constitutionally obligated to do. Trump targeted him for doing what he was constitutionally obligated to do. And that was immediately followed by these right-wing gang members targeting him and chanting for him to be hanged.
Yeah, and I know it's sort of a strategic thing, but the impeachment managers were very positive towards Mike Pence, talking about how awesome he was and how devoted to the Constitution he was and everything. What he was doing was ceremonial. I guess he did it. That seems like sort of a bare minimum, and I get it. They wanted to kill him, and we have sympathy for people who were targeted by domestic terrorists, totally. Let's also bear in mind that he largely went along in a mostly silent fashion with the big lie for literally months leading up to that. And by the way, considering that there were a lot of people that they wanted to kill that day, Mike Pence was probably the most obvious. There was the most evidence for it, but we saw the video today of them wandering the halls and calling out for Nancy Pelosi as if they were starring in a remake of The Warriors. We saw that. But that said, they wanted Mike Pence the most. They wanted to murder him. They'd elected a gallows. And where is Mike Pence? Where is Mike Pence speaking out about what happened and what these Republican senators should do? He's under no obligation, I suppose, but it sure would be powerful considering that he was targeted and how obvious it was. And as you said, they say it wasn't Trump that inspired this. So if it wasn't Trump, what is the argument for who it was that got these people to think that Pence needs to be killed after 4 years of loyalty? Where did that come from? If not, Trump is the person who was talking about that. I have a quote. So not only, did he talk about him that day in the morning and how Pence needs to come through for us, even though again, Pence couldn't do anything. Pence had already told Trump there's nothing I can do. The morning of, Trump is still implying that Pence could save them. And if he doesn't, it's because he's choosing not to. As they're hunting for Pence, he tweets about how Pence didn't do what he could have done, even though again, he knows that Pence couldn't do anything. On January 4th, 2 days before that, Trump had a rally where he said, I hope Mike Pence comes through for us. I have to tell you, I hope that our great vice president comes through for us. He's a great guy because if he doesn't come through, I won't like him quite as much. So who exactly was inspiring these feelings towards Pence, if not Trump?
I mean, look, John, I really think that it's important for us to be fair. So let's just wait and see what Donald Trump's highly competent defense team has to say about it. Maybe they have a valid argument in response to what you're saying. No, of course they don't. They were a complete and utter disaster on day one, literally. And we'll talk about that in more detail later in the show. Guy.
Maybe the representation will be a little bit better and prepared.
But since you're mentioning, Pence, one other piece of footage that was shown today featured Mike Pence literally like running along with his family members. They were being escorted away from the insurrectionists as they had breached the building. And so what really boggles my mind is the degree to which people like Pence fear Trump and fear his supporters, right? Because Pence was a victim of what happened that day, but he's so afraid of Trump's supporters that he is not speaking out against what Trump provoked. He's not speaking out against Donald Trump. I don't know where Mike Pence is, right? But we did see footage of him and his family members being escorted away, and they looked incredibly panicked for good reason.
Yeah, we know that he apparently felt it was the ultimate betrayal by Trump, what happened on the 6th. And that's what we found out. He hasn't come out and said that. That's what we found out from sources close to him. And that's it. So he knows that they wanted to kill him and he knows that it was Trump that did that. He feels betrayed by it, but for either for fear or for future political calculations or for God knows what, he is not saying anything and he hasn't for literally weeks.
So we have some more video to get to, and I want to actually start off with something that you referenced, John, and that's the insurrection is specifically looking for Nancy Pelosi. This is video that was presented for the first time today. I had not seen it, and even though I'm not, really a fan of Nancy Pelosi, it doesn't matter. They were targeting her, and these are people who wanted to physically harm members of Congress who they disagreed with politically. So with that in mind, take a look at what was shown today during the trial.
Watch now how the mob searches for Speaker Pelosi's office, which is marked in red, and the House chamber itself.
Where are you, Nancy? We're looking for you.
And one thing that became even clearer during today's trial was how many close calls there were, how close the insurrectionists really got to these members of Congress. And before we get to an example featuring Mitt Romney, John, any thoughts on that video regarding Nancy Pelosi?
Yeah, that guy was just hunting her down so he could talk about election security and express his concerns. Some political speech. He wouldn't have done anything. None of them would have. It's the sort, like I know that how many times has someone in a situation like we're in right now said, it's impossible to watch this footage and not understand what's going on, except it should be impossible. It's certainly possible to not watch it, even if it's being played in the room you're in. It's possible to be a Republican and to be watching Fox News all day and you didn't see it because they weren't covering it. Yeah, they just weren't covering the impeachment trial of the president because it would be devastating. And Republican senators, the vast majority of them are gonna be perfectly fine with not actually coming to grips with what that is. I'm sure that there are some people in that crowd that just wanted to break down the doors and break things and steal things. But there are undoubtedly a significant number of people who wanted to kill. That's how mobs work. They are as bad as the worst people in them. And in this crowd, the worst people in them were about as bad as people can be. And so whether it's Mitt Romney or Chuck Schumer or Mike Pence or Nancy Pelosi or Ilhan Omar or whoever, any one of those people, if they found them, those people would have been lucky if they got away with only being seriously injured. These people, they were consumed by bloodlust. That guy, I can't even imagine what he was hoping to do with Nancy Pelosi. And as you said, we obviously politically disagree with Nancy Pelosi a ton, but we also understand that those sorts of disagreements feel a little bit less significant when we're talking about politically motivated violence. Some people can't make that distinction. They think that this is a distraction. The increasing desire amongst a number of people in America to murder their political opponents isn't worthy of actually, like critically thinking about that in theory we should look to the things we have in common with these people. After all of those people trying to hunt down Nancy Pelosi are certainly anti-establishment. But no, this, thank God this stuff is being shoved into people's face and they have to have a reminder of what the 6 was actually about, because there are so many people that either ignored it and continue to, or trying to rewrite history about what it was actually like.
One more video for the audience, and this one features Mitt Romney, who also had a close encounter with the insurrectionists, and luckily, with the help of Capitol Police, Officer Goodman specifically, he was turned around to a safer direction. Take a look at that.
In this security footage, you can see Officer Goodman running to respond to the initial breach. Officer Goodman passes Senator Mitt Romney and directs him to turn around in order to get to safety. On the first floor, just beneath them, the mob had already started to search for the Senate chamber.
One thing that I would have really appreciated would have been someone like Mitt Romney, who clearly was terrified. I mean, you see him running. I would have liked if he had spoken out in support of Representative Ocasio-Cortez as she was being demonized by people in this country, whether it's politicians, voters, and I'm talking about people on the left and the right who tried to minimize the fear and the terror that she felt that day, because clearly he felt it too. So it would have been really nice if he stood in solidarity with other members of Congress who expressed how terrifying that day was for them.
Yeah, and also this thing isn't over, so we don't know exactly what's gonna end up happening, but it doesn't, I haven't heard any confirmation that there are gonna be witnesses. There's been a lot of people saying they wanna rush through this as fast as possible. How do you have this without Goodman testifying and being asked questions about what that experience was like, what he thinks those people were there to do? Mitt Romney, many of the people who had to be chased out of there, Mike Pence, none of these people who are involved in this have to give any sort of accounting, despite, first of all, how powerful it would be and how much light it might shed on what the experience was actually like. The closest we're getting is some footage and some new footage that doesn't have sound. But what if we were to hear from the actual cops, those who were trying to fight off this murderous mob? But as of right now, it doesn't look like we're going to have that.
I would like to see Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz testify. Why is it that 2 individuals who served as accomplices to Donald Trump and his provocations get to vote, get to weigh in on whether or not Trump gets convicted in this impeachment trial? I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. But this is the system we have in place. And I don't know if it's fear of breaking decorum rules or what it is, but I really don't think that Hawley and Cruz have any business playing any type of role in an impeachment trial. These are not unbiased individuals. These are people who actually engaged in what we experienced in the Capitol that day and the days leading up to what happened in the Capitol that day. Yep. We have to take a break, but when we come back, we have some more news related to the impeachment trial, including a TYT video that was used as part of the evidence presented by impeachment managers. We'll show you that and more when we come back.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Hey everyone, welcome to our first social break of the day. First, a programming note. TYT is turning 19. We've been around for 19 years. And to celebrate our 19th anniversary, we're gonna have a special on Monday, February 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific. And all your rowdy friends are gonna be there. Cenk will be there, myself, John, JR, Aaron, Dave, Steve, Ben, and Brett as they talk and reminisce about TYT throughout the years. So you can watch that live at tyt.com/live or on any of the other platforms that we're on. Also, Happy Half Hour on TYT is happening tonight, so make sure you catch that as well. Brett Ehrlich, of course, is hosting, and the best place to watch is twitch.tv/TYT, where Brett will be streaming live. You're still streaming live, right, Brett? Yeah. All right. And by the way, you can watch that after the post-game show tonight at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. So from our member comments, I bathe in a billionaire banker's tears writes in and says, I wonder how much things could have been different if Trump just said a few days after the election, we had a good campaign, but we weren't successful. Joe Biden is the new president. Probably a few extra people would still be alive today. Yeah, definitely.
No, they're saying it had no effect. None of that had any, the crowd still would have been there. They would have still rampaged through. They would have still beaten a cop to death. That's what we're supposed to believe, that he had no effect whatsoever on that.
By the way, the people who helped fund what happened that day, are they gonna face any investigation or criminal charges? Maybe we should look into that, maybe.
What happened with Charlie Kirk and his buses?
I mean, yeah, anyway, the progressive defender, Trump's attorneys conceded it was an insurrection. So the House impeachment managers really just need to focus on how Trump incited it. One, what Trump knew about the crowd, and two, what his intentions were in his speech. That being said, it is important that the House managers are creating a historical record. I absolutely agree with you on that. Meg writes in and says, I guess if anything, Democrats are doing a great job of laying out the evidence so that when the Republicans vote to let Trump off, which that's likely to happen, they'll be exposed as the craven lunatics they are. I mean, I hope so. Someone's apologizing to me, so I'm gonna read this. I haven't read it ahead of time. Danny writes in and says, I have to apologize to Anna for getting on her about the language she used during the riot on the 6th. I thought Trump had committed sedition and I'm sorry, hold on. I thought Trump had committed sedition and the crowd was committing insurrection from that. But then after actually hearing all of the words used in this deal, I see Trump just incited an insurrection and a few people in the crowd committed the actual sedition, asking people to hang Pence, take over the Capitol, etc. My bad, Anna had it right. Danny, I never saw your original comment, but I really thank you for apologizing and more importantly, keeping an open mind and pivoting once you have new evidence. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Let's get back to our show. Welcome back, friends. Anna and John with you. Let's get right to our next story. We're staying on the topic of impeachment, where something fascinating happened, something that I would have never expected, but I'm really proud of. So, as the impeachment managers provide more and more evidence of Donald Trump's provocations that led to the January 6th insurrection, something came up that we didn't really expect at TYT. A video interview for TYT was used as a piece of evidence. Now, this was an interview that was conducted by Michael Shore on the field. And the point here is to draw attention to the fact that the insurrectionists were motivated by Donald Trump's words. Take a look.
Dozens more tweets and speeches of Donald Trump spreading his lie. But you get the point. His supporters got the point as well. They firmly believe that if he lost, it was because the election was rigged.
Will you accept the result if Joe Biden wins?
No.
Under any circumstance?
No.
Why is that?
Because it's lies and deceit and corruption.
It's important to talk about the substance of that interview and why it was used as evidence in this impeachment trial. But I do want to make a point about Trump supporters and their love for camouflage apparel. Like they all have camo apparel. Like do you have camo apparel, John? Like I feel like it's a rite of passage. Like you have to have it.
I've camped out in the Arctic and I don't have camo apparel. By the way, I love the idea that like, they're like, I want camo apparel, but I also want to rock my Trump thing. So like in my mind, it's just a floating Trump shirt, basically. Like I'll still be able to see that part of you, you know? Anyway.
But look, that interview isn't an isolated case. I mean, watch interviews conducted by any other news organization and you'll notice a very similar theme. This unwillingness to accept the outcome of the general election because of repetitive claims that had not been proven regarding widespread voter fraud. And it's infuriating because it doesn't matter that the Trump campaign lost dozens and dozens of court battles on this because they failed to provide a shred of evidence. These people were indoctrinated into believing that the election was not free, it was not fair, that the election was stolen from Donald Trump, and that all
was a buildup to what we experienced on January 6th, which is the case that the impeachment managers are trying to make here.
Yeah. Yeah, the entire thing is so frustrating. Like literally, like with every passing bit of video, with every additional thing, and they also wove in obviously like affidavits where the investigators talked about things that had been planned and everything. It's this weird feeling where, and this is not unique to this, I think we felt it during the pandemic as well as stuff was coming out. It's like you see this new thing and it's so obvious what's going on and what it should lead to that you feel this sort of like false preemptive victory of, well, surely this will matter. I think that's been sort of one of the common threads the last 4 years. Well, surely this will get through to people. But then also you've had it beaten into you over the past few years that no, in a lot of contexts it won't. Like I don't know. Like if we found there was a security video of somebody answering a call during the attack and it was Donald Trump on the other line telling them where to go, would Hawley then be like, damn, now I have to vote to convict? Like it really just does feel so utterly pointless to be trying to demonstrate to people where America has gone to, that it's not going to just go away. Those people are still out there. The belief that no election will ever legitimately go against your interests. And that's not unique to the Trumpers, but they thoroughly believe it. They will never have to live through an election where their preferred candidate legitimately loses. This is scary stuff, but it's so hard to actually get people to understand that. And it's complex. There's a lot of stuff that feeds into that, but I don't know, it's a sort of sick feeling.
No, I totally agree with you on that. I mean, I don't really understand. Not everyone, but I'm certainly seeing people that I really, really respect and really like on the left minimizing what happened in the Capitol that day. And I don't know if that is fueled by a fear that if you take it seriously, then it will provide an opportunity for the federal government to beef up the security state and the surveillance state. I mean, but there is a way to accurately talk about what happened that day and talk about the severity of that situation without calling for more of, a war on terror like response to it. I don't want that. Yeah. But I do think it's important to understand what type of precedent this sets if you minimize it and treat it as if it's no big deal. Because it is a big deal. It's absolutely a big deal. You want to live in a country where your democratic process is respected, where people feel safe participating in our democratic process, and where a person in a position of power like the president of the United States will be punished, will serve the consequences of inciting violence, inciting an insurrection. It just blows my mind when people minimize what happened. But there's just an abundance of evidence. I'm really proud of TYT and the coverage that we've done over the years, not just on the Trump campaign, but everything that we've done that's kind of help to provide some evidence of what's really happening in this country, and to see that piece of evidence provided during this impeachment trial, I think is important, because that short interview, that short snippet that was shown really gives you a sense of how powerful the indoctrination by the right wing has been. It's not just about Trump's words. Trump's words are important, right? The fish rots from the head down, but it's also like the right wing media echo chamber, right? You keep seeing it over and over and over again, where they just absolutely refuse to tell their own audience the reality of the situation, the reality of the outcome of the election, the reality of the court cases that the Trump campaign lost, dozens and dozens of them, because they failed to provide a single shred of evidence pertaining to widespread voter fraud. All of that led to the thought process that woman had during her interview with Michael Schor.
Yeah. And as someone noted in the chat, it's great to see that now, because this is this historic impeachment, that Michael Schor will go down in history, or at least his right arm will. But that's awesome, because he's done, like they showed that one clip, he's done so much great on the ground reporting for us and for other groups. Also, I would have loved to have seen some of Emma's epic interviews at these rallies show up there. I mean, how much time did she spend exposing herself to the like undiluted insanity of those people over the course of years. I feel like they could have gone for a lot more of that type of footage if they really wanted to sketch out what he had led those people to believe.
Well, let's move on to how Trump reacted to day one of the Senate impeachment trial, because I was personally curious about this after his lawyers bungled the situation. So let's discuss. Well, it should be absolutely shocking to absolutely no one that Donald Trump was furious with how his lawyers handled the first day of the Senate impeachment trial. Now, he had two lawyers, and both of them, to be quite honest with you, were awful. But Bruce Castor was certainly the worst because he literally stood up and made the case that the impeachment managers were doing a fantastic job. And then he proceeded to ramble on for 45 minutes without making any type of case, without really defending Donald Trump. It was a disaster. And so now we're learning, based on reporting from Fox News, that Trump was screaming, that he was upset. Trump believes Castor gave a rambling opening argument. They said, these are the two sources who spoke to Fox News. Castor's 45-minute opening remarks were widely panned on social media after he praised the House impeachment managers for a job well done. And well done is in quotes because he literally used those words. By the way, the Associated Press also reported that while Trump was watching the impeachment proceedings from Mar-a-Lago, he actually said he was also impressed with the opening video presentation from the Democrats. Because to be honest with you, they have really done a good job preparing for this case. Now, Castor was so bad that it seems like he was like almost intentionally sabotaging Trump's defense here. The American people just spoke and they just changed administrations, Castor said at one point. He said the public was smart enough to, quote, pick a new administration if they don't like the old one, and they just did. He said that, guys. Can you imagine? Trump's in Mar-a-Lago watching his own lawyer say that. It was just so good, so good. And by the way, the other lawyer, go ahead, John. Sorry, I'm like rambling
really
on.
fast. I mean, saying they were smart enough to do that is great, but let's also bear in mind, because maybe people forget this, Trump still doesn't admit that he lost. He certainly doesn't admit that it was lost fairly. Like his lawyer has gone beyond him on acknowledging that the election was over. There are still people like Trump, like Marjorie Greene, who are saying, no, this thing isn't done yet. He actually won.
Oh, it's so good. Like I kind of love Bruce Castor. Like, I think he's on our side. I think he's really genuinely. No, I know, I'm kidding. But again, his performance was so terrible that, I mean, one could believe that he's trying to sabotage it. Now, with that said, David Schoen was the other lawyer who I thought was pretty terrible as well, but he at least tried to make a case here. And he was recently interviewed during Hannity's show. And here's how that conversation went. Take a look.
There's a lot of criticism of the opening, not your part in particular, but it seemed to be free associating, extemporaneous, somewhat meandering. Will the rest of this process, because you're going to be out, as I understand it, Friday and Saturday, will this be more focused and will it be more prepared? And are there other people that are planning to make those arguments? Because some conservatives called me and said, whoa, we need somebody harder hitting here.
Well, the fellow who you say did the opening today has his law firm there. There seem to be very capable people. I'm sure today he hadn't planned on going. And so I'm sure that they'll be very well prepared in the future and do a great job in the case. There's a lot to say, and I know they feel very strongly about fighting against what they're seeing.
I want you guys to play that video as B-roll as we discuss, because when Hannity asks him or mentions that Schoen isn't going to be there on Friday and Saturday, like tries to kind of present him as the more competent one, he feels so good about himself. Like he gets this like big smile on his face. He's like, yeah, I sound like I'm smart because the other guy is really, really, look at his mouth. Yeah, I like that. Thanks, Hannity. Anyway, sorry, I just noticed that and it was hilarious. So John, what do you think about Schoen's response there?
Well, I think it's amazing. He gets like so happy that he's the competent one that he then goes on later in the interview to say that the only reason other politicians don't incite violence is because their fans don't have the stones to do it, basically. But anyway, this is what you get when you try to force your impeachment legal defense team to continue to say that the election was stolen, which is what he did. That's apparently why he lost his team a week before. Losing your entire legal team a week before the impeachment trial makes it harder for them. And when you don't pay your lawyers and you're a genuinely awful person, it's much harder to get a lot of lawyers to really be like banging down the door to represent you. And the thing is, Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham, who had a little back and forth when he tossed to her show about this, none of them acknowledged any of that. Trump's personal culpability in producing this outcome. They have never seemed to engage seriously with the fact that this guy seems to pick the worst people always in every situation. And the worst people, the cheapest people, the people who desperately need this opportunity. And because they won't do that, because they won't admit that Donald Trump picks people for horrible reasons like he.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
Saw them on Laura Ingram's show once or twice. They instead have to create a worldview where everyone betrays him. All of them who turn on him or don't perform well. It's all the deep state. You know, it's really simple. It's like it's Trump's razor. He doesn't think about any of this. He's really, really bad at all of this. It's not that he's the one good person surrounded by a festering swamp of betrayal. There are simpler explanations than that.
Yeah, look, in any other context, I would agree with you. In this context, Trump literally, he couldn't find lawyers who were willing to represent him. He couldn't.
But that's
he needed the help of Lindsey Graham. No, I agree with you 100% on that. And we've talked about it on the show. The reason why he was scrambling to find attorneys who were willing to take on this case is because he wanted attorneys who would stand up there and talk about how the election was rigged and stolen from Donald Trump, which of course people don't want to do that. And then B, he doesn't pay people. So there were very understandably lawyers who were like, I'm tempted, but I also want to get paid, and Trump is notorious for not paying people. So I agree with you 100%. In other contexts, though, whether it's appointing people to his administration or choosing people to work with business-wise, he does legitimately choose awful people, but he never takes responsibility for how poorly he manages any given situation, and neither do his enablers on Fox News, OAN, or Newsmax.
Yeah.
So real quick, Bruce Castor, who's the lawyer who had more foibles than the other one, Schoen, actually gave an interview to Wall Street Journal, and he's like, I think I did great, which I love. So remember, Bill Cassidy is one of the Republican senators who originally believed that the Senate impeachment trial was unconstitutional. After the first day of the Senate impeachment trial, he actually changed his mind and voted along with Democrats in allowing the impeachment trial to proceed. That's relevant so you can understand what Bruce Castor is referring to in this quote that he gave to the Wall Street Journal. He says, you put 100 people in the same room, you're gonna get 100 different opinions. We only lost Senator Bill Cassidy, so I believe we had a good day. Oh my God. Nailed it.
Winning.
And then finally, I mean, we keep talking about Bruce Castor, and I think it's only fair to show you a snippet of his performance from yesterday so you guys understand what all the conversation is about. Take a look.
I'll be quite frank with you. We changed what we were going to do on account that we thought that the House manager's presentation was well done. Instead of floodgates, I was going to say originally it will release the whirlwind, which is a biblical reference. But I subsequently learned since I got here that that particular phrase has already been taken, so I figured I better change it to floodgates. We still know what records are, right? On the thing you put the needle down on and you play it. You ever notice how when you're talking or you hear others talking about you when you're home in your state, they will say, you know, I talked to my senator. Why is it that we say my senator? You know, I feel proud to know my senators.
No one cares about your process, bro. Like, you know, I was gonna do this. And then last night while I was having a slice of pizza and a Coke, I was thinking about maybe making this argument, but he went on for 45 minutes like that. And he thinks he did great. It's amazing.
I don't know what metaphor you use. And if you're going to change it, just change it. Why do we have to know that? This guy is like a walking embodiment of needless work meetings. Like this could have been summarized. I know it. There's some way this could have been quicker.
Amazing. All right, we gotta take a break.
Okay, sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're running a little late. So unfortunately, let's take a break. But when we come back, we have more news for you, including the reaction from Bill Cassidy, his own words on why he changed his mind about the legality or constitutionality of this Senate impeachment. Come right back. We'll give you that and more. Woodside from our member section has a comment that I agree with. If Officer Goodman doesn't deserve the Medal of Freedom, no one does. That guy is a hero, literally saved Mitt Romney's life and likely every senator's life. And I mean, obviously, when you look at the footage, you see just like how incredibly brave he was, but more importantly, how he maintained that courage, even though he was outmanned and was his own life was in jeopardy there. So I agree with you. Thank you for that comment. All right, I wanna also read some super chat comments. Izzy writes in and says, I love TYT, want to support my TYT fam, want to give a shout out to the Dragon Squad. So that makes a lot of sense since we have Daddy Dragon on today. By the way, John, are you really Daddy Dragon or do you have an actual like name that isn't ridiculous?
This has nothing to do with me. I have not established a name. I will just say for accuracy's sake, the thing they call me is Dragon Daddy as opposed to Daddy Dragon. I don't know which makes a person more uncomfortable. I think they're probably about equal. But let's be accurate, Anna.
You're right. Okay. Thank you, Dragon. Dragon Daddy actually makes me a little more uncomfortable. I don't know why. It does, right? Brett saying yes.
You can just say Daddy if you want. I think I just invented that.
Ray De Los Santos writes in and says, just got my TYT membership back after having to drop it when the pandemic started. Love you guys. And y'all are truly needed to counter the media. Thank you so much for your support. We really, really appreciate it. Stephanie Z writes in and says, in addition to the brave officers, I believe the massive layout of the Capitol's interior also helped save lives that day. Yeah, man, that building is complicated. Like, I never really understood how complicated it was until watching the trial today and seeing, the map of the building itself. Turkish Delight, which is my least favorite dessert, I got to keep it real, writes in and said, it's a dessert. It's a Turkish dessert. It's called lohum. You like it? You would like it. You like anything with sugar in it.
That's true. I like it because, of its connection to, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I made it once. It was good. I like it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Turkish Delight writes in and says, Republicans will not win the popular vote in our lifetime. They will have to rely on shenanigans and gerrymandering to get the executive back. Corey Robin is an author and a political scientist that I highly recommend because he talks about how the Republican Party has they know how unpopular they are, and so they do rely on rigging the system in any way they can to give themselves the upper hand. We had a great interview with him on weekends for the Jacobin Show. So if you want to check out that interview, you can as well at youtube.com/JacobinMag. Also, BC Trumpet writes in and says, up here in Maine, they have camo MAGA hats with orange writing. Sounds super fashionable and sexy. Being sarcastic, obviously. All right, we got to get going, unfortunately, but I love reading your comments, guys. Thank you for writing in. Looking forward to reading more of them during our next break. Welcome back, Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you. John's the host of The Damage Report on TYT Network. Please make sure you check out that show and subscribe if you haven't already. It's a daily show talking about news and politics, and you can watch it at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern. And yeah, support John and what he does because he is the daddy of dragons, or the dragon daddy. And people love it.
Take it.
Yep. All right.
They do.
Well, and by the way, one great way to support this show is to share and like this stream. So if you haven't done so already, please do so now. It would be super appreciated. Thanks in advance. But for now, let's move on to Cassidy, Senator Cassidy, who's a Republican who was persuaded enough by the Senate impeachment trial to change his mind on something. So let's discuss. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy seemed to warm up to the idea of impeaching Donald Trump following Trump's lawyers' disastrous performance defending the former president on day one of the Senate impeachment trial. Now, previously, Senator Cassidy was one of the 45 Republican lawmakers in the Senate who believed that the Senate impeachment trial was unconstitutional because Trump is no longer a sitting president. Now, we've talked about how legal experts say that argument is complete and utter BS. But after hearing Trump's lawyers, after hearing the impeachment managers make their case for impeaching Donald Trump, Cassidy changed his mind, and he explains why in this next video.
Listen to it, it speaks for itself. It was disorganized, random, had nothing. They talked about many things, but they didn't talk about the issue at hand. And so if I'm an impartial juror and I'm trying to make a decision based upon the facts as presented on this issue, then the House managers did a much better job.
Senator, how about the video of the mob attack on the Capitol
That is not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is it constitutional to impeach a president who's left office? And the House managers made a compelling, cogent case, and the president's team did not.
But how did you feel watching that? Not that it affected your decision.
It speaks for itself. I think it's drama enough, but that's not related to why I made my decision.
Do you wish they addressed the past precedent of, the William Belknap and all?
They did.
The Trump's team?
Trump's team, yeah. I took notes. I always take notes. But at one point I leaned over to Cruz and I said, Cruz, are they talking to the point at hand? He goes, not now. Because I'm thinking maybe I'm missing something. And again, if I'm there as an impartial juror, respecting my oath of office to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and one side makes the argument and the other side does everything but make the argument, then to live with myself, I make that vote.
It's fascinating that he turned to Ted Cruz and asked him any question about what was happening during day one of the Senate impeachment trial, because Cruz aided and abetted Donald Trump's provocations and incitements, which led to the insurrectionists breaching the Capitol and carrying out the violence they did on January 6th. But I don't know why Cassidy decided to mention Cruz by name there. But does Cassidy's change of heart give you any hope, John? Do you think that there's a possibility that more? Yeah, I agree. GOP senators could change their mind.
Next story. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. Maybe. I would say, first of all, he was like oddly defensive in a way that I found to be annoying about what he would talk about and everything. But I would say my stance until the vote is finalized is, if you are a Republican and you want some credit, there is only one way you get credit, and that is voting to convict Donald Trump. You don't get credit for anything else. You don't get credit for voting that it's constitutional. You don't get credit for saying that the video today really affected you and like leaking a statement that leaking that someone saw you and you had tears in your eyes. None of that is worth anything if you then vote to acquit the president. And the vast majority of the people who right now all over Twitter, you can see all the Republican senators who were very affected by what they saw and will in the end vote to acquit the president, they get nothing. Like, if you give them the credit now, then they don't need to actually vote to convict. So I would say, let's hold off on any of that credit until it's done. It's not going to take long. It's only a couple more days. And we'll see then if Cassidy or any of the others, McConnell's saying, you feel freed up to vote if you want. It's about your conscience. Even if you said it was unconstitutional, you still can change your vote if you want. Okay, well, let's see, McConnell. Let's see, do you actually vote to convict? Because if not, then I don't care about these things you do so that some people will say that you're being reasonable now. There's only one reasonable outcome, and that is a vote to convict.
People like McConnell are fascinating because McConnell, fairly recently gave a speech on the Senate floor where he was very obviously talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene and referred to her as cancer, or the ideology that she represents within the Republican Party, he referred to as cancer. And I say that because McConnell seems to want to maintain whatever's left of the republicanism that he represents. But in order to do that, you need to stop aiding and abetting the worst people who have bought into and enabled Trumpism during the last 4 years. Instead, he does this super pathetic, wishy-washy thing of I think that you should vote with your conscience. No. How about you actually, everyone loves to give him credit for being this super smart Republican leader, right? Like, he knows what he's doing and he gets what he wants. But when it comes to actually standing up to the nefarious figures within the Republican Party, when it comes to speaking out against Donald Trump, he won't do it. He won't do it because they're all terrified of Trump's base. They're all terrified of Trump. It's so sad.
I know that this is still early and maybe we can update this as time goes on, but what does your gut say in the number of Republican senators who will vote to convict?
My gut says that maybe 5 of them.
That's funny. I was thinking 4 or 5. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could see getting, like maybe Murkowski and Collins and Romney would seem crazy if he didn't. And I'm sort of just assuming that there's 1 or 2 more out there. But yeah, I'm thinking probably 5. So not nearly enough.
And remember, the Senate would need 2/3 to vote in favor of convicting Donald Trump for him to actually get convicted. So that's quite a few Republican lawmakers. And, I'm not saying this to be defeatist. It's just very unlikely that 17 of them are going to vote to convict Donald Trump. But it is also important to kind of juxtapose some of the, I guess, more moderate Republican lawmakers to the absolute garbage coming from Jim Jordan, who's in the next video. Before I go to it, though, let me give you more context. Remember, Trump's attorneys were a disaster, absolute disaster. One of his attorneys, Bruce Castor, on the first day stood up and gave props to the House impeachment managers. Right? He said that they did a job well done. And so Jim Jordan loves to be completely disconnected from reality. That's what propagandists like Jim Jordan like to do. And so here's a little bit of Jordan essentially showing everyone that he's willing to tell you the exact opposite of what actually happened.
I thought the president's team laid out what this is really about. This is about the Democrats trying to cancel the guy that 74 million Americans voted for. They've been obsessed with this. The obsession continues, so much so that they're willing to ignore the Constitution, willing to ignore due process, and frankly, willing to ignore the facts. I thought it was interesting when it comes to the facts that the video the Democrats played, nowhere in that video did they have the statement where the president said, peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. And of course, the president's counsel strongly, I think very strongly, made the case for how this is not constitutional. The simple fact remains, how do you remove someone from office who's already left? As our colleague has said, this was impeachment by reflex, no due process for the president. And I thought the president's team effectively laid out those core arguments, and we'll see those reinforced over the next few days.
They did such a great job that Republican Senator Bill Cassidy went from believing that the trial was unconstitutional to changing his mind and voting in favor of the trial proceeding because he now finds it constitutional. So that's interesting.
Yeah, his strategy for using a mask is pretty interesting too. Yeah, and he's also lying. Yeah, Trump made some reference to peaceful or whatever way into it. But that was also in the video that the Democrats put out. So Jim Jordan was lying about the content there. And he's even like he's one of the only Republicans that pretended he was happy with the defense up until that point. So that gives you all the idea you need about how honest he's going to be about the rest of it. We know that none of them were satisfied with that. It was a comical performance.
All right, John Iadarola, thank you for joining me for hour 1 today. Everyone go check out the damage report. Make sure you subscribe and support the show. And John, have an awesome night.
You too.
All right, everyone, we're going to take a quick break and come right back with some more news on Julian Assange and where Biden's administration stands on the issue of extraditing him. Come right back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.